Hello, and welcome to Mental Health. It's a Trap. We're your hosts, Susan and Stephen, mother and son, unraveling the complexities of the mental health traps people fall in. Join us on this podcast journey as we demystify the mental health labyrinth, explore common issues, and provide you with tools to navigate this sometimes extremely daunting terrain. You can expect engaging conversations, personal stories, and probably also have a laugh or two. Access to mental health care should not be what causes you additional stress. We invite you to follow along, and together we can embrace the darkness. All right, welcome back, everybody. We have an awesome guest with us, someone who I've known for, I want to say at least 11 years, over a decade. My first supervisor out of grad school. We both graduated from Columbia University School of Social Work, so it's really cool to be able to get to work with her and work under her, and now as colleagues, just to kind of spread healing when it comes to grief and trauma. She's an expert in the field. She has a private practice. She's a professor, and she also does retreats. So I'm really curious for you to share, because obviously I know a lot about you, but would you mind kind of sharing with the audience who you are and why do you do what you do?
Oh, so nice. Thank you. I'm so glad to be here. So I'm Zaneta Gileno, and we do have a long history together, working in the trenches and all the things that come with social work school. Like you said, I have a private practice. I work in Utah. I have a master's degree, so I'm a licensed clinical social worker, and I'm also a certified thanatologist, which is that happy topics of death, dying, and bereavement. So that is where the space I live in my professional life. And I think, like all of us that work in this space, we're kind of called to it from our own grief journey. So I lost the only dad I really knew when I was 10 years old. He died suddenly and tragically, and I just kind of put it in a box. And I saw from my own grief journey and that grief really having its reckoning that we can only bury it for so long. But there are wonderful evidence-based practices out there that can help us really integrate that loss. And so that's kind of what I do, because I know how alone I felt and how kind of hopeless I felt when I was in my early 20s, and really getting the support I needed and deserved helped me kind of turn that pain into something more meaningful. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's huge, right? I think one of the things with one of our other guests, Lucy, who's a grieving sibling, we kind of passed over the topic of talking about it because we got down a rabbit hole. So if you can like recall again being a kid grieving, do you remember what that was like for you as a 10-year-old whose dad died?
Yeah, I do actually. And I don't know that I did until I was going to therapy and like gave that little girl the opportunity to have her experience, because I think the biggest thing, my takeaway from that time, is that I didn't get the opportunity to really mourn. I wasn't given the skills or the tools or like anything I really needed. It was just, your dad's not coming home, and no one really talked to me about how I was feeling. And in my memories of it, it was so quickly that mom like packed up all his things and gave away all his things. And it was like, we just never spoke about it. And so I never felt like it was okay to speak about it or okay to feel any sort of way about it. I remember it feeling really alone and me not doing well in school. And like when I went through old childhood things and seeing in fourth grade how my teacher had put on my report card that I daydreamed a lot and I needed to focus more in school. Like, so even at the school level, they were like, something's wrong with your kid, not what happened to your kid.
Yeah.
So, of course, mom brought that home, "You need to pay more attention in school." No one was like, "How you doing?" So, that was my experience, and it really blew. It really blew.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, that's pivotal. I mean, when you think about just how adults, often treat children, teens, young adults, like people who are younger than, as like they have a problem versus like not understanding the whole part of them of their experience and being like, what's going on?
Mhm. Yeah, and no one ever asked how I was. I do have memories of them asking, "How's your mom?" "Hey, how's your mom?" But no one ever asked how I was. Maybe they asked her how I was doing, but she never in turn asked me how I was doing.
Mm, that's a
And that's one
that's a
of the
big one.
traps. Yeah, and that I think that's kind of like one of the traps, right? Working in the mental health field and looking at young children being diagnosed with ODD, like oppositional defiance disorder,
Mhm,
ADHD, all of these labels and diagnoses, when at the very core, we don't even know what's going on in their home environment, if they're experiencing trauma or loss. And so, it's such a disservice that we do in our culture to
mhm,
not support children and not give them, the space to express how they're feeling about it. So instead, and, so children more times than not have a hard time verbalizing their emotions and what they're going through and all of that. And so we see it in behaviors, and still in those behaviors we think, you're a challenging kid, you're a difficult kid. And that follows a child throughout their school years.
mhm,
And the teacher starts saying, "Oh, wait till you get Susan. She's been a tough cookie," and things like that. And it just makes me really sad to know that for what we do know, that we don't allow that processing to happen for children and even young adults, right?
mm,
So I'm
yeah.
sorry that was your experience.
Oh, thank you. Like, I look back and I try to honor that little girl as best I can. And even in school, my teacher, I remember coming back to school after however many days I was off, and she said, "Zanita's back today. Zanita, can you tell us all why you've been absent?" And she knew. So I just say, yeah, my dad died." And then like the kids made fun of me at recess
Mm.
that my dad died. So it just I hope things have grown a little bit, but I feel like when we don't know necessarily how to mourn and grieve in a healthy manner, but once we have to go through it, then we can really be those change agents for other people. And like you said, like you get these labels in school, and that's when I finally went to therapy, as my mom said I needed help because the impact I was having on the family was really negative. And that once I said, "Well, can we go to therapy together?" And she said, "I don't need help. You need help. Like you're the one that's really impacting the family." And so and then like at that time, then she did go to therapy with me as like the consultation. And then I remember she did take me to my dad's grave because I'd never been, and just like pulled up and was like, say your goodbyes. And like we really muddled through it. Like thankfully we got to process that together later. But just makes you feel like something's wrong with you or you're not doing life right when what's happening is like normal for what we go through when we have trauma.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. It's really, I've worked with a lot of clients over the years who have been misdiagnosed with those labels as children. And, some of them were going through some pretty horrific sexual trauma, neglect, physical trauma that the school was unaware of and the doctors were unaware of. And they're just, giving kids stimulants because they say it's ADD. And then, they're already hypervigilant. So we're bringing their body levels to such high extremes that they can't tolerate it. So we start seeing even more behaviors that are concerning. Yeah, it's a really vicious cycle, and unfortunately, it does still happen, and I think it's more of a cultural shift of looking at, um, allowing people to feel their grief in whatever way works for them. As long as I say you can do whatever you want, as long as you're not hurting yourself or anyone,
Mhm.
just do you and be able to, get whatever support you need, even if it's not with family, it could be with chosen family, it could be with an adult that you can confide in and be able to talk to, and even for adults, because some adults don't have any good support systems in place either.
Yeah. Yeah. Thankfully, my mom learned, and I think she learned a lot through me because I've been working in this space for so long. So I have like the language for it, the language that we didn't have when I was going through it, or even when she was going through her own loss. Like, I know that she did the best she could because she was left, she was a widow. So it wasn't just like I was the only one that was grieving. But it is really interesting when you see how things kind of come around full circle, and but there still are a lot of gaps in care we provide families who are grieving, and children most especially, I think.
And I don't think we look at loss sometimes as traumatic for some people, right?
Yeah. Especially if it's like if they're older, oh well, grandparents die. Like they were 90, what did you expect? And everybody thinks they have their own timetable. Well, it's been a year, or you knew they were sick. Like I don't understand why you're still struggling. Like those things make it even harder.
And I think that's a big point too, that even outside of like grief, when kids or teens are in therapy or go to therapy, like you like it was like, oh, you're the problem. And it's like, well,
No.
being where we are now, it's like, well, y'all got problems too, parents and adults, and
Uh,
the kids behave in a way that can reflect
yeah.
what's happening in the family. And I see this a lot where like parents or guardians are encouraged to like be in the session or do the work, and they're like, oh no, 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 like fix the kid, like the kid's the problem.
100%. In my practice, I see kids, and there are that level of that I recognize where my mom like took me to therapy and was like, fix her, right? Something's going on, you need to fix her. But I do notice that I'm grateful to have a lot of parents like encourage their kids to go to therapy and just say like they're not coming to me. They're not asking me questions, and I know that they're going through something. So if they'll talk to you, that's all I want. And I think that's such a beautiful thing that they like know that it's another adult that can be there, that can support their kids. And what a beautiful thing. That's all the kids really need is someone they can talk to, that they can trust, that they can share what they need to share. And outside of certain things, we keep it between us, you know, and that we don't have to tell their parents. And I always tell the kids, and I tell the parents when we do our intake, there's certain things that I'm bound that I have to share, but other than that, we plan our updates together. So that is such a like sacred space, for lack of a better word, to hold with kids, hold with our clients in general, where they can just have that adult they can talk to and know that I'm not going to be like, oh, this is what's really going on, you know?
Because I can imagine that being not true with, teachers or other adults who kind of just not necessarily nilly-willy, but they'll be like, oh, your kid told me all these things. And then that adult who was a safe person is no longer a safe person because they're sharing all of that
Uh-huh.
information.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
just,
And they're probably thinking they're helping, right? Because if they're a parent too, they're like, well, I would want to know this. It would shape how I show up for my kid.
right, and I think it's like even talking amongst themselves, like when you talk about teachers and things like that, they're not bound by the same HIPAA things that we are, right?
Mhm.
So they tend to share more and like talk to their neighbors or whoever, say, oh, did you hear about Susan's kid? And yeah. And so, and kids pick up on those things. They're very in tune to and very observant of their environments. And I think that we don't give them enough credit in terms of being able to be aware of those things. They might not understand the full concept of what's going on. They know something's off.
Mhm. And that people know something they don't know. Or the way people show up for them, they're like, "Oh, they know something." Like, they might know what I said, or they know what I did, or, what have you.
I think that comes up in grief as well, right? Kind of like, especially with kids, like one of the things that you want to be careful about how much information you tell a child because you don't
Mhm.
want to traumatize them more, but you don't want to be like, oh, well, he's sleeping forever, or he just fell asleep, or he's lost. And then kids are like, what do you mean he's lost? Like, where did he
Yeah,
go?
yeah. Yeah. And I think like I still remember like sitting on the porch when mom told me my dad had died and wasn't coming home. And the doctors had told her like he had had a heart attack while at work and then was supposed to be coming home and then he had a stroke and then that's when he died. And so I had heard like that he was going to be coming home and then mom's like he's not coming home. And so I remember like the doctors told her he would be a vegetable. That was the term they used. And so it was best that he died. And so mom said it's best that he died. And I was just like I would have taken care of him. That's all I remember is thinking is like how is that best? And it is weird to like share my own grief journey because as a clinician I don't share those things. Like with my clients they'll often know, depending on the situation through self-disclosure, like I have my own grief journey and that my dad died, right? But like to talk about the nitty-gritty of it, it's weird to be in this position where I'm talking about the nitty-gritty of my grief journey. But it just reminded me where you said like they'll say things without thinking about it. And I just still like as a little girl, I'm like, I would have been okay if he was a vegetable. I didn't know what that meant, but I was just like, that's okay. I would have taken care of my daddy. I wanted him to come home.
Hmm. And that speaks to like the knowing, right? Understanding life and death and knowing that death is permanent. Although sometimes when we talk about children in grief, there's that concept of them not fully understanding. And
Yeah,
so what you
especially
don't
because
tell,
they still have that magical thinking, right?
yeah, yep. So if it's not concrete enough, then they'll make up the answers or the thoughts on their own.
Yeah.
Right, yeah. I know it just makes me think when my daughter died, and my youngest daughter was 2 at the time, and it was some years later, so she may have been around 5 maybe, and we drove by a cemetery, and I had my cousin's son in the car as well, the two kids, and he was a year older than her. We drove by the cemetery, and they kind of talked, so I had my daughter cremated, so I'm like, "How do I talk to a 5-year-old about cremation?" Right? It just didn't Yeah, it just felt icky to say, to because then the questions would be, well, what happens when people get cremated, and
Mhm.
and so when you think of a child and they're not having really concrete information and saying like, oh my gosh, you put her in the oven, you know what I mean, those kinds of
Mhm.
things. So, and again, it was breaking the language down into, her body, just the doctors couldn't help her body anymore, like, and just had to really break it down into things that she would understand without, and then still towing the line about how much do you share with a child, right? A young child.
Mhm.
And as she got older, and she was able to be more abstract, and we don't, I mean, everyone has their ideas of death and afterlife and all of those things, and so still always feeling like I was towing the line of just being careful of not oversharing, because I think sometimes as parents we tend to give kids more information than they can process, and
Yeah.
then still being able to answer at least their basic questions, right, at the very least. And it wasn't until she was older that, we were able to have that conversation and she understood, So again, I think we have to always be thinking about the age of the child, and, because again, if you give children like bits and pieces, sometimes they create their own stories in their head, and they tend to start to believe them as they grow up, and they hold on to those as truth, right? Uh,
Mhm.
yeah, it's a balancing act.
I think it's important, like especially when we work in this space and we work with kids and their parents around grief and loss to point out what one of my mentors taught me, Dr. Alan Wolfelt. He said, when we let a kid know that their loved one has died, it's the start of a conversation that's going to last the rest of their lives. Because what, like you were saying, Susan, what we tell a 5-year-old is not what comes up for the 15-year-old,
Right.
or what comes up for the daughter who lost her dad at 10 years old, what that means when you're graduating and picking a college. It's an ongoing conversation. And no doubt parents are going to make mistakes, no doubt. but I think leaning in and trying is where the real gift is,
Yeah.
and recognizing there's also people there that can help. And then there's people there that can really do a lot of harm. People in our lives that want to say things like, oh, at least this, at least they didn't suffer, at least, like, there's no at least, there's no let's make it better. Like, that meaning making has to come from us, the ones on the grief journey, not the people prescribing what that meaning should be for us, or, oh, it's going to make you stronger and you're going to look back and it's going to mean this and that. Like, those things, like, we're hearing as adults who are supporting kids who are grieving, and we're all just trying to minimize pain. But like
Right.
really being open to that pain and going, this is hard and my life's never going to be the same, and holding space for that, and like helps us hopefully get to this place eventually where we say it can still be beautiful. Like, just because it's not going to be what we thought does not mean it can't still be beautiful and meaningful. These
Exactly.
lives we build on the other side of very significant loss.
Yeah, and some of the things. I mean, I used to do a lot of grief groups early on in the Compassionate Friends organization, and those things came up a lot. And people have said those things to me as well. God needed an angel. Oh my gosh, it would make me want to crawl out of my skin.
Yeah.
And I would say to people, how would you feel if that was your child and someone said that to you? That God needed an angel, so he just took your child. I mean, it's just ludicrous in my mind. I can't even understand those statements. And then the other side to that is, I think people don't like to see others in pain, and so they're trying to fix it, and they're using words that they think are helpful. And again, it's more about educating, right? It's more about saying sometimes there are no words to take away someone's pain. They're
Mhm.
just, I don't care what words you come up with, nothing takes away pain. It's that we learn to live with it as we move forward.
Yeah.
We figure out how to manage that loss in our life. And hopefully the shift is going from that moment in time when they died to the life that they lived and the life that you shared with them. You
Mhm.
know? And
Yeah.
that's easy to say, right? So some people don't have good relationships with loved ones. And so they're like, "I don't really have any good memories. It was rough," you know? And, and so again, it's like trying to, at least for me, it was trying to find the things that I could hold on to versus the things I had no control over.
Yeah.
Right? I didn't have any control that she died. I didn't have any, I couldn't fix it for my other 2 children. I couldn't fix it for myself, kind of, you know what I mean? And it was just learning. My sister lost her oldest daughter when she was a baby. She was 3 months old. I think I was 16 when she died, and we never talked about my niece. It was just hush hush. We don't talk about it. I mean, people said things to her like, you can have other babies," and
Mm.
which I go, "Wow, that's rough." And again, I don't think it's intentional for the most part. Maybe some people are intentional with their words that they use. Though I just think that it's trying because we don't like to see each other in pain.
Mhm.
And sometimes we have to sit in the pain,
Yeah.
you
And
know, for
unfortunately, I think it's also this element of, like, I have a friend and I love them and I don't want to see them in pain. However, there's this underlying element I find with the people that say the least helpful things, that it's what it makes them feel that they're uncomfortable. They're less concerned about the fact that you're in pain and more concerned about what it makes them feel inside. And so they're trying to make it go away because of the cautionary tale that it could be. Like, a mom with another mom is like, "Oh, that could be me." Steven and I both worked with military families, and the military is really there for the survivors that are left behind after a military loved one dies. But it also is pretty common for that group to kind of pull away, and then the survivor community steps in because it reminds them what could happen to their loved one. And that's hard space to hold. You want to be there for your friend, but also your partner's deployed. And so it reminds what can happen. And so there's that element too. I find it's rarely the people that have their own grief journey that are going to tell you the things that are hurtful.
true. hopefully, that we've
Yeah,
learned in our own, like what's been helpful. And generally we tend to share what's been helpful for us and things like that.
yeah.
And yeah, that's another perspective,
Mhm.
definitely.
Well, to throw a wrench in it, we do know that it happens within the grief community.
Oh, it totally does. You try to rush people along because you're like, this is what helped me and this is what's gonna help you. But I would say like from the outside when you're at a funeral, like it's like,
Mm,
yeah, it's those at least things. Anybody that's trying to minimize pain, like you said, Susan, like that's so true. Like we have to remember we can't take somebody's pain away no matter what.
yeah, or even the one-ups. Oh,
Oh,
your
yeah.
dad died like this? Oh, well.
Hmm.
This
Yeah.
happened? Oh.
Yeah.
Like,
Oh, well, I
what do
was
you
orphaned
do?
at 10. At least you still had your mom. Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think that that's detrimental. Like it hurts everyone when people like I think there's obviously something that underlies it when they do that. And I think it also like harms everyone else, including the person who's saying that, because I feel like it's they don't feel heard or seen in their grief to have to kind of one up a person
Mhm.
versus giving the other person the space of like, we both have this grief pain, even though it's different. We've had this experience, and how can we sit in that together without taking away from, oh, this is the worst loss ever in the world. And you're like, to you, yes, but to me, my loss is also valid and the most painful thing for me.
Yeah.
And when can we start using that language, like me, how I feel, how it impacted me, versus generalizing it into like, oh, everyone feels this way.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. So one of the biggest things that I used to generally kind of address in the grief groups that I ran was comparison.
Mm.
When we compare grief, it's just so invalidating. And it just, it's invalidating to oneself and to others, right? It can go both ways. And even people who struggle with mental health challenges, and they sit in my office and say, there are people out there that have it worse than I do. And I said, that's very true. And your journey is your journey. It's not open to be compared with others' journeys, because what you struggle with, someone else may not. And what they struggle with, you may not. So, when you compare it, I think it keeps people stuck too. It keeps people in this stuck place of not being able to move in a direction because they're just, so then they minimize their own experience and they're like, well, it's not that bad, even though for them it's difficult. But they're saying,
Mhm.
well, Stephen's journey is worse than my journey. So who am I to complain or to talk about or to process my feelings or thoughts around it? Yeah.
Yeah. And
It
we
almost
see it
seems
among
like there's a
clinicians
connection.
too. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like, it sounds like there's like a connection with people who don't understand, right? And they're trying to hide from their feelings. And then people who are trying to not be, in a sense, stigmatized of mental health, of like, oh, I see a therapist, but my crap's not that bad because so and so has XYZ, or they're in the hospital, or I haven't had anything that bad. And like my mom said, it's like, no, but yours is valid to what you're going through, and it's okay not to be okay. And that's kind of what life is, of being human, is making mistakes, feeling our feelings, going through stuff, and getting help, which if we keep going down the hole, we're not told or supported in reaching out for help. Oh, it's weak if you reach out for help. You're crazy if you go see a therapist. Like all these things that are stuck in our subconscious that keep us from that healing and transforming space, and keeping us stuck.
Yeah. And what's wrong with you that you need therapy because I've gone through so much and I didn't need therapy? That kind of messaging, right?
Mhm.
And then
Yeah.
I'm the devil's advocate. I'm like, are you sure?
I love it. Are you sure you're okay? Are you sure you don't need therapy? Yeah.
Yeah. Because unfortunately, there are some people like I don't need support in my life, and I can get through life on my own. And I don't know. I struggle with that personally, saying I don't know how you get through life without support. Whatever
Yeah.
that support is, it might not be therapy, it might be something else. And You know, I would love to see an individual just go through life with no support, just to see what the end result would look like.
Yeah. You're just kind of existing, I think. I would just be existing and
Mm.
just surviving through things. And sometimes, like, there's many times in my life where I dig into things and then I'm like, I'm good for now. I'm fine. This is and like honoring that in ourselves and in others, I think is so key to be like, it's fine. We don't have to be on this journey of always evolving and always changing and always growing. Like just honoring that if we stay how we are, that's still a really beautiful thing. But like knowing if we want more, like it's there and it's available to us. Yeah, it's key.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I think it was already said earlier, but it has to be a choice. Like, right? You can't necessarily force someone to get help that doesn't want help. And you can also still do things to support them and let them know that you're concerned and right. Kind of like that balance, even like with working with kids, right? Like with
Yeah.
how do you balance telling children certain things without giving them too much information? And then when you're adults, if you need support, like how do you have that conversation without feeling like you have to fix them
Hmm.
because you're not comfortable with what you feel on the inside because of what they're going through. Like they're in pain and then you're in pain and then you want to fix their pain because you don't want to deal with your pain.
Yeah. Yeah. And not everybody is going to have that like post traumatic growth, right? And now that people know of the term and then know or see in their own life, I got so much better. You can get so much better. Like, that's not ours to tell someone any more than it's ours to say, you need to train and run a marathon because it changed my life. But I really like, Susan, how you said, like, that comparison and how hard it is. I think I noticed just from a clinical standpoint, and then also in my own life, that desire to really like earn your right to get help is like, because we were often not allowed to have our own experience when we were growing up, right? Like those codependency roles that we have in family dynamics or in relationships where it's like, well, I need to self-sacrifice here because they need it more than I do. And the truth is we just need it. Like I need it because I need it, not because you need it more, but just
Right,
'cause I need it.
exactly. Yes.
Or because you don't need it as much. Like you don't need it, so I need it. Like we can all need it and we can all get that support.
Right, and it makes me think about, you know, internal skill sets. I don't know, that's just I think about internal skill sets, and I think that we all have different internal skill sets, and some are more developed than others.
Mhm.
And some can have some within themselves that are more developed for them, and then some things that are less developed and someone else is different, right? So
Mhm.
it's really understanding the internal skill sets. And I mean, I sat with a patient the other day and I said, you can paint your nails all you want. You can put all the makeup on you want. You can get your hairstyle done. You can wear nice clothes. Though if you don't work on the inside, it doesn't matter what you do to the outside to make it look pretty, right?
Mm.
Because that beauty has to come from within. And as easy as it's, people say, and I've heard clients tell me these things, "Oh, you're so beautiful. You have a great personality." I'm like, "Why do you, so it's like talking to someone who's intoxicated.
Mm.
Keep talking because you'll be blue in the face before they're never going to understand it in those moments. Or when a child's having a tantrum and you're trying to talk it through with them. Let them
Yeah.
have the tantrum, let them come out of it when they're more open to receiving the information, right?
Mhm.
And so though, and I think that's what we do. It's like the appearance on the outside, we need to like kind of we have to look good, we have to dress a certain way, we have to act a certain way, and so we're always doing this external work instead of the internal work and really identifying what those internal skill sets are, right? And being
Mhm.
able to improve those in the areas that we might need to. It doesn't mean someone is better or worse than you. It just
Mhm.
means their internal skill set is different. So, depending on what they need support in, then we kind of target that internal skill set and develop it to help them in that one area that they're looking for support in. And
Mhm.
that's what I do. That's kind of my what I do with the adults that I work with is, you know, if you're stuck in the black hole, let's explore the black hole and let's figure out what you want to do with the black hole. Do you want to stay there? Do you want to move out of it a little? Do you want what do you want to do with it, right?
Yeah.
And you know, it has been such a humbling experience to watch people grow from that black hole and be able to find their own internal skill set to say, yeah, that was a dark place in my life for a long time, or maybe a year or 6 months, whatever it was, and to just bear witness to the growth that people can do when they're not comparing themselves to others, when they're looking for support, when they're ready to make some changes and things like that. So yeah.
I love it. That's beautiful. I was thinking, like what it must have been like in pioneer times, like in the US when people would wear black after someone they loved died. And like the whole community knew they were in black and they were in mourning. And then some people would never change out of black. And it'd be like, oh, she never changed out of black after her husband died. But it's signaling to the people around you, like, I'm going through a hard time. Like something tragic has happened to me and I need special care and handling. And I think, I mean, I wonder what that must have been like to have that like external thing that showed everybody, hey, I'm grieving. Because I think like one of the hardest parts when we have grief and trauma is that for a short time, everybody around us may be mindful of what we're going through, but you still see people out there on the roads doing their thing. Like your world has completely stopped, and the rest of the world just keeps living their life with like reckless abandon. Like, it feels like it's just smacking in the face of what you're going through.
Hmm. And that's why, like, a lot of people will share, you know, when my loved one died, regardless of the relationship, when my loved one died, people came to the house, they made meals, they checked in on me. We've talked about this in some prior podcasts. And then, and then that's it. Like people move on in life, they go back to work, they get back into their routines, and you're stuck.
Mhm.
You're going like, wait a minute, what? Why? Why is the world still? It needs to stop. I'm not in a good space, you know.
Yeah. And you know, those first couple of months, like your body's in such shock and you're going through the motion that when the dust starts to settle, that's when people quit coming. The dust has settled. And now I'm like, oh my gosh, my loved one died. Like now I have to figure out all these things, like the funeral's over, like whatever. But now you have to figure out how to like move forward without this life you thought you were going to have. And everybody else is like, oh, they've moved on. Yeah.
Hmm.
It's interesting to think about how different that is. And like for me experiencing it now, like Steven knows my mama died. It's like a year and a half now. And it brings up so much. And then I feel like I'm rudderless in a way that I didn't really feel as a kid, or maybe I did, but I didn't have words for it because like I was a real daddy's girl. But holding this space for my clients is like, someone comes to me and their mom dies, like I have nothing good to say about it. Like, come on in, the water's piping hot or freezing cold. Like, there's nothing good about being a part of the Dead Moms Club, but knowing that you're not alone in it and that I've seen so many clients through it and have friends through it. And I know like I got through the death of my dad, but it's just, I don't know. It's really interesting because you put on this face as a clinician, like, I've got you. I can hold this space for you, but like, can I? Like, can I really hold this space for you when I'm like, oh, here comes Christmas and mom's not here?
Hmm.
My friend shared a meme that was like a therapy meme about like, oh, I love like coming to therapy because it looks like you have all of your life together. But the meme was like, that's only what you think.
Yes. Yeah,
It's like,
100%. Yeah. And I think like it's so important. Like, I really learned during lockdown to see that I am also a human. And I feel like it took a client telling me when I showed up for therapy, like a mess. Like in the beginning of lockdown, I'd have my selfie light on and I was like at my table and makeup and I was like ready. And then like as we went farther into the pandemic, like I was just haggard. And like a client I had seen for a long time was like, "Are you okay?" And I was like, "Oh, I'm trying. I'm here for you." And they were like, "You're going through a pandemic too." And I was like, "Oh, I am." Like I am. It doesn't work for everybody, but I know like my clients, and I'm sure you see this too, Susan, like your clients seem to find you. And some of your clients are like, they just fit right in and see you as how you operate and what you can offer for the most part, you know? And sometimes the clients that come to us are like, smacking in the face of things we need to work on, you know? And so it helps you hold space for both of those things. Like, I'm not going to self disclose. It's not a peer support group when I'm in a therapeutic role. However, I also need to recognize that I probably need to do a little bit more self care when I see my clients who are talking about the grief of their mom or their dad, you know, because I'm
Mm.
like, oh, it's really smacking in the face for me. And I never want to be in a position for my clients where I'm steering them away from the nitty gritty of what they need because it's like plucking on my own struggle, you know? But I think just knowing that for ourselves is so important. And like,
No, I
talking about
agree.
it in this way is important because I'm not generally talking about my grief journey at all. I'm there for other people's grief journey.
Right, right. And I think that's the biggest piece, right? Is to understand that we are human beings too. And I do say that to patients and clients. I am a human being. I will make mistakes. And you have every right to talk to me if anything comes up. And I think I've gone to some local college. Was a girl that was in a cohort above me when we were in our master's program, and so she would always say, "Can you come and talk to the social work students?" I'm like, "Sure." And the first thing I would say to them was, "Before you step into the room with anyone, do your own work first, because if you don't, you're setting yourself up and you're setting them up, and it usually turns out ugly." And
Mhm,
there's a lot of truth to that because it is as a clinician, and I had sat with a client some years ago who had lost her son and sat across from me and said, "You have no idea what it's like to lose a child."
mm,
I was like, "Ooh, you're messing with the wrong mama right now," right? That's going
mhm,
through my head. And I had to kind of move that space because it was my, and I knew it was my stuff. I knew it was, I felt that defensiveness of, no, I do know what it's like to lose a child. I know what it was like to lose my child.
mhm,
And so being able to say to that mom, I have no idea what this experience is like for you to lose your child. So I had to kind of just phrase it in a way that for myself to be able to push my stuff because it wasn't about my stuff. Though when we
mhm,
sit with people, sometimes our stuff comes up and it's okay. We're
mhm,
human beings, right? Though I don't know that we're really taught that. They don't really teach us that in master school. I don't know that that's really taught. And though when I supervise clinicians towards licensure and we talk about those things, like what comes up, how do you manage it, and it can be a balance, I think, for some people to be able to keep their stuff on the bookshelf when they're
mhm,
sitting with another individual who may be experiencing something very similar that they have.
mhm. Yeah. I don't think they do teach us. I think like that it's valuable when you say like when you go talk to the new social workers, as you were saying, Susan, and tell them like make sure you've dealt with your own things, right? And we learn that in school and then have wonderful mentors like you that remind us of that or really put it in perspective. But I feel like in school, and what do you think, Susan, Stephen? It's like if it's coming up for you, it's because you haven't dealt with it. But like, how do I deal with my mom dying while I'm still a therapist? You can only take so much time off and you're kind of building the plane as you're flying it. And if
And
it
I
comes up for you because of the lens of school, it's that you haven't done your own work. But like you have, it's very normal. Like you said, Susan, like we're humans and your own stuff is going to come up. But how do we deal with that in session? How do we move from this is me, this is them, and this is the space between us? We don't learn that in school. Absolutely not.
And I think
Right.
that's a great skill to teach people, and I think it's practice too, like being able to practice it because It's not like I sit with clients for the last 10 years and things have come up every time. There's been occasions where things have come up and being in, and I knew that. I came into the field later in life. So for me it was more life experience than it was really book experience, even though, obviously I got my degree and everything and my license, though, for me, I think having all of the life experience that I've had really helped me in the field
Mhm.
and really helped me to, I had to do a lot. I did a lot of work before I came into the field, before I even knew I was coming into the field. So that was a bonus for me.
Yeah.
And and I think it's important to, even in our profession, to say we are human beings. And, you know, I I I say to clients, if you see me like kind of, if my eyes are looking heavy, I probably haven't slept well the night before. Guess what? Therapists don't sleep well sometimes either, because we get put on these pedestals and we have to, having to maintain the energy to stay there is unrealistic, right? Um,
Mhm.
and then I'm like, if I had a really rough night and I was up all night, there's no way I can sit through 5, 6, 7 people in those hours, right? So I might
Yeah.
have to take a mental health day, right? Again, it's just we are human beings too. We live our lives outside of work. We have responsibilities. We have children. We have families, and some people have their struggles,
Yeah.
financial struggles, whatever, relationship struggles, all kinds of stuff. And and again, still knowing that that's not the patient or the client's responsibility, it's ours, and that we have to own that piece and do our work on that, um,
Mhm.
and, so that we can be present and focused while we're sitting with others.
Yeah.
They're paying us for that space, and we need to give that to them.
Yeah, 100%. What a beautiful thing when we do take that mental health day. I think it also gives them permission to be able to take their mental health day, and we can't always be a robot. Sometimes we come in and we haven't slept well, like you said, and we're holding that space for our clients, but sometimes we're like, it it needs to be a little bit about me. So in therapy, it can be all about you. And I need to take a day. I need to take a knee on this one.
Right. I'm just, if there's days where I don't sleep well, excuse me, I'll get up and use the whiteboard or, just so that there's movement in the room. Or I'd say like, oh, let's just get up and stretch. So without having to really disclose anything, right? Um,
Mhm.
so again, I think there's all these boundaries that we need to hold in those spaces and for ourselves and for others.
Yeah. I'm happy to hear that you're supervising like people towards licensure too, because that there's so much learning comes from that as well. You know, that real world learning where you're able to tell them these things are going to come up for you and this is how you can handle it. Like, because we don't learn those things in school. So yeah, it's yeah.
I have a colleague, she's a friend, she's a close friend, and we had worked together, and she is now an LICSW as well. And I can't even tell you how many times I hear come out of her mouth. We didn't learn that in school. We didn't learn that in school either.
Yeah. We
And I
didn't
said,
learn
we
that in
should
school.
just keep a running tally and a running list of what we don't learn in the schools and maybe go back to the programs and say, how do we incorporate these? Because you're taking, for the most part, it's usually young adults. They graduate with their MSW, so they might be in their mid-20s, early to mid-20s, and they may not have a lot of life experience, and then we put them in rooms with people, and then they're like, "Oh my gosh, now what do I do?"
Yeah. And expect them to not be human and
Exactly.
expect them to just be stoic and hold space and be this container. And yeah, it's a difficult, like unrealistic ask we're making.
Right.
Mm.
So how do we as the mentors in the field, like, identify those parts and really go back and push back at the systems to give the people the tools that they do need to be successful when they're first starting out. And again, they're going to learn, they're going to make mistakes. We all do. We still do, even later in the field. And,
Mm.
and just being able to, I mean, so when my first client ever was a man that was probably 6'4", I'm 5'1". I'm short. So I go out, bring the client into the room. I invite him to sit in the chair. I sit in my chair, and he stood up as I was sitting in my chair and screamed at the top of his lungs, swearing, totally out of control. And I just sat there and stared at him. I was like, okay, it's your hour. Do whatever you want. Now, I'm an older adult at that point. So
Yeah.
I was like, yeah, you're not the first person I sat around who was chaotic and screaming and swearing. So have at it.
Yeah.
And I just gave him the space. And then, like 20 minutes later, he plopped in the chair. And I looked at him and I said, okay, so what's been going on? Like, what is this? And he's like, you're my third therapist in 2 years. Oh, I'm sorry, fourth therapist in 2 years. And I said, I can see how that can be frustrating,
Mm,
right? So if I was just in my early 20s and just getting out of school and someone sat me in a room with someone like that, I probably would have had a very different response,
mhm.
right? So again, we never know what we're walking into or what's walking in. And we can't prepare for all of them, though we can, I think allowing people to have that space of frustration. Like, I was just like, my coworker who started the same time I did, right out of college, a younger girl, she said, I was ready to call emergency services. I was worried about you in that office.
I bet.
And I said, listen, I'm going to share this with you, and I will share that with anyone at the agency. You will know if I need help in my office. Otherwise, stay out of my business. Let me do my thing. Because I
Yeah.
think, again, think about that. Four therapists in 2 years. That's a lot of change for someone, and
Mhm.
someone with like, um, substance use, bipolar disorder, homelessness, all these things, right? And you keep switching his therapist, and he doesn't have the right to be frustrated. Of course he does. So I had the ability to kind of think through that. I don't know
Yeah.
if I would have had it at 24 or 25 or whatever, with no
Yeah.
life experience.
Yeah. I
So
can imagine it likely would have been very different.
probably.
Yeah.
It's like loss at 10 and loss at
Yeah.
older in life. It is different,
Mhm.
Mhm.
and how do we
Before
still.
we keep going down the rabbit hole, gonna
Oh,
interrupt.
he just monkey wrenched us or
We're-
me.
we're- Well, I know Zanita has other things, and as we keep going, you two keep talking. So I want to make sure that I know that she has other things to attend to. And obviously, we're just scratching the surface on like a lot of other topics that we can go down, because this podcast is not just for people, it's just not for clinicians, it's kind of for everyone around mental health. And obviously, this is a really good thing to discuss because, like you said, it's not taught in school, and everyone has to figure it out, and people burn out and they leave the profession. And so these are obviously great topics, but I want to let Zanita end it with, if there are any tips or tricks you would give someone who might be grieving or in trauma, what might be an initial step or two to, and I kind of lean away or want to around like being like, oh, healing, because I think even healing is kind of like a buzzword now. And it's like, what is healing? So are there any tips or tricks that you can give someone who might be at the beginning stages of grief or in their trauma and they're not sure what they can do or what they should do? Is there any suggestions you might give them based on your personal and professional experience?
Yeah. I think that's a really good question. And I love how you made that distinction about your mom and I, like, what we kept like sharing and talking, and like there's so much to unpack around it all. I think the important thing, like that you say, like, it's not, your podcast isn't just for clinicians and it's not just for people who are looking for mental health support, but it's for everybody. And I think like the things that we shared are really, could be really helpful for everybody around mental health to know that like these are internal experiences that your clinician is going through, you know? When we have grief and trauma, like loss is a part of life, and remembering that when we're going through it, I think is really key, and showing up for ourselves and trusting that, like, our body slows down and it's slowing down for a reason. Things are fuzzy and it's fuzzy for a reason. To the best of ability, especially in those early days of grief, is let it do what it's going to do, and as we weather it longer, it becomes like we get used to, like, some people call it those grief waves. We can't ever say, oh, everything's different after a year. We learn to manage it, like your mom said. We learn to carry it very differently. And our life kind of expands around the loss more than like that loss becomes smaller. So I think having that perspective could be really helpful. And I think a really good tip is, if someone's saying something to you, one of your support people, someone you love, what they're saying always makes you feel like where you are isn't enough. Like, it's okay to find other support people. If what they're trying to do is move you from where you are, change your perspective, change your experience, that is not going to help you integrate that loss into your life or that trauma any quicker. It's actually going to kind of stunt the process. Those are things I can say. And then if you don't have someone in your life that you're like, oh, when I'm around Steven, I feel lighter and I feel like I'm enough and I feel like the way I'm managing things is okay. But also I'm kind of called to like more healing in a very gentle way. If we don't have somebody like that, I'd say look for a therapist and somebody that's skilled in grief and trauma, because you're literally paying that person to be there for you and help you know if what you're going through is normal or not, and help you do it in a healthier way.
And where can people find you if they want to learn more information?
My website is hoperisingtherapy.com, and it has my other offerings and how to find me as a therapist or a coach. And yeah, so www.hoperisingtherapy.com.
Cool. And so if anyone is listening and you're in the Utah, are you just licensed in Utah or can you provide?
Yeah, I'm licensed in the state of Utah and then do like grief coaching elsewhere.
Okay. So if anyone has any questions, I would encourage you to go check out her website. It has her contact information and you can learn more about Zaneta. And obviously, again, we just scratched the surface. So she'll definitely be someone we'll have back on to connect with and share her wonderful insights and knowledge and wisdom around grief and trauma. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to add them either on Spotify or on YouTube, and we'll get them to Zaneta and we'll probably answer them in a follow-up. And then again, I hope everyone else takes care.